Guys, welcome into Contemporary Issue Wednesday. We're talking about the flaws in democracy. Democracy doesn't seem to be working as much as it used to. Are there fundamental flaws in the democratic system, and what are they, and how can we address them? That's what we're talking about this week and next week. So today on this channel, we want to look at sort of three fundamental flaws we see in democracies. So the first of these flaws that we see that need to be remedied is this whole idea of short-termism, right? Short-termism. Now this idea is basically that politicians' term limits, the amount of time that they're in office in the Western world, usually ranges from 2 years to 6 years. And it's usually somewhere in between. So why is this a flaw? What does this produce? Well, what we see happening on this channel in the world is that because these term limits are so short, politicians have to run on sort of short-term promises. They have to deliver short-term sort of tangible effects. The feeling out there is, in order to get elected, you have to pander to your electorate's interests, their self-interest. And so what this sort of produces is a short-term, tunnel vision approach to politics. What can I get for my electorate, for my constituency now? So if a politician, just imagine a politician getting up on his campaign trail or her campaign trail and saying, hey look, we're facing a lot of issues today. For the next 4 years, what you can expect is it to become probably a little bit harder in the short run. We've got to make some structural changes. It's probably going to get a little bit harder, a little bit worse off for you, but I promise you, in the long run, it's going to be a lot better. Do you know what happens to that politician? They never become a politician again. But if you really want to go to the root of the problem, it is the electorate, because the electorate, the people in the polis, the demos, they are electing these people, and they're electing these people because they want to have their interests looked after. And this sort of carries on to our second problem we see in contemporary democracies, and that's this. Uninformed populace, right? So much misinformation just swirling around, particularly on Facebook and social media, concerning things like the economy, like foreign policy and defense and security and legal structures. I mean, all this misinformation is sort of swirling around, and it's creating a misinformed, ill-informed populace. So I'll just give you two examples, right? Let's take the economy. Either austerity, tightening the belt, cutting back on spending, government spending, rising taxes, works, or massive stimulus, infrastructure building, all that kind of thing works. But what I don't trust is for, people in Western societies to sort of sit down and think, well, let's take a long-term view. You know what? I used to think that austerity works, but maybe stimulus does work. Or you know what? I used to look at stimulus and think that's the way to go, but maybe austerity is working. No, that's not what happens. What happens is people are attached to their ideology, and they'll protect that ideology at all costs. And if anything comes against it, they get their shields out and their swords out and they attack, usually on social media, usually on Facebook. And they don't use expert opinion, they don't use facts, they kind of just emotionally respond to anything that comes against them. The second example what we would give on this channel of this sort of misinformation swirling around and causing havoc in the democratic system is the whole issue surrounding global warming and the environment. So, either man-made global warming is having and will continue to have devastating effects on the environment, or it won't. But there's so much misinformation floating around on both sides that you can't trust that people can look past their own interests and make decisions regarding environmental policy that will actually be true. And so if you look at one hand, you look at people who are sort of climate deniers, I can't necessarily trust that these people would put past their interest of living a very lavish lifestyle, living a lifestyle that consumes a lot of resources and driving F-350 trucks that look like tanks invading Afghanistan, putting that aside and saying, yeah, I should probably relinquish my right to live at such a high level of resource consumption in order to sort of help, benefit the environment. On the flip side, you can look at people who are really strong climate change proponents, and you can see this really strong historical pattern in the last few years of the ostracization of any scientist or any person who doesn't believe in climate change. They're literally excommunicated from the scientific community, right? And so these are two sides of the same coin. I think it's this misinformation that's swirling around that's ultimately creating self-interested power maximizers. What do I mean by this? Well, basically, this misinformation and this short-termism is creating people who just have this tunnel vision, who all they want to do is go around and maximize the amount of power and self-interest goods they can get, right? And misinformation plays a really important part because you can co-opt this bad information from Facebook or from websites or from bad media, and you can use that as sort of weapons in your arsenal, ammo to sort of shoot at your opponent, even if it's not right, even if it's completely based on quasi-science or it's based on your own sort of wrong convictions. Self-interest power maximizers, not very good for sort of long-term view of democracy and building a good society. So, the third and final flaw that we see in democracy right now is the massive power of special interest groups, right? So you've got all these individual sort of self-maximizing power people who are like, I need more, I need more, I need more power, I need more power. They find other people who agree with them, and they get together and they form interest groups. And this can take the form of sort of massive Wall Street lobbying, defense industry lobbying, or massive sort of minority lobbying. And what it does is it basically carves up society into different groups, right? It says, you're no longer an American or you're no longer a European, you are a young white male millennial, or you are a Wall Street tycoon, or you are a, poor Hispanic in Southern California, right? And what it does is it creates division between everyone, and instead of working together in a political system that says we're going to be able to look beyond the divide, all it does is it cements divisions within society. And it just creates this us versus them mentality, right? It's all of us, it's the 99% versus the 1%, or it's us, this one minority group against all of America, and they all want to see us survive. And it creates this really disunifying effect where people can't look long term, can't take other people's interest in mind, because if they do, they think, well, my interests aren't going to be taken in mind, so I have to fight for my interest or else no one will know. So to wrap up, the problems with democracy as we see it on this channel, you've got short-termism running rampant in politicians, you've got a misinformed public who are turned into self-interest power maximizers, and you've got the rise of very divisive, very powerful interest groups, which creates division, not unity. Aren't you just filled with hope? Aren't you just filled with hope for the future of democracy? Well, don't worry, next week we're going to prescribe some sort of remedies for these ills that are affecting our society. So, stay tuned to the channel. If you like the video, share it. If you really like it, subscribe to the channel, comment below, and remember, reality always trumps ideology.